Welcome to the Vibrant Life podcast. This is the official podcast of the Vibrant Life community. I'm Sarah Nolan. I'm a burnout prevention and energetic management consultant, and I'm here with John Rowley. And I'm so excited to have you here, John, today. He is one of the top guys in ClickBank, America's lifestyle strategist, best-selling author, speaker, TV personality, and a serial entrepreneur, and probably one of the most kind and generous people that you will ever meet. So I'm sure you'll pick up on that through this episode. So thank you so much, John, for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me on, Sarah. And after that introduction, I want to hear myself.
Yeah, well, you'll have a chance after the episode. But you guys, John has one of the most interesting life stories that I've ever heard. And he's going to be sharing a few of those stories with us today, starting out with a car accident that he went through. And he has just been so strong and had such a dedication to faith and trust and I believe believing in himself in order to get through some of these challenges that, most people have never experienced stuff like this. So I think it's just going to be really inspiring to hear, what's possible when you let go of the excuses and you just, you just believe in yourself and have faith. So thank you so much, John. And I'll let you just kind of get started with what we talked about before.
Okay. Now, I've had my challenges, as you know, Sarah. But my story's not like Hacksaw Ridge, where I'm some hero, superhero that overcame all these odds. But I have. But there's always the behind-the-scenes story too. There's a lot of tragic things that can happen in your life as you're trying to rebuild your life. So you have to overcome other things as well. But when I was 19 years old, I was going to college in Kansas. I was a runner, and I came back that summer. I was an amateur athlete, and as an amateur athlete, you didn't really get much support. If you had a scholarship or whatever, that was one thing, but, you didn't have any financial support the way the athletes do today. So I came home that summer and I worked for my dad as a janitor, and I worked a lot of hours, 7 days a week usually. But as I was working, I would train in the morning. I would typically train sometime in the afternoon and then the evening again. So I was training 2 to 3 times a day, whether it be running, swimming, or lifting weights. So I was always doing something. So I wore myself down through the summer. And, the night before I was supposed to go back to college, my best friend and I, Brian, wanted to go out to the movies. My dad is like, John, don't go. You're burning the candle at both ends. Well, at 19 years old, I knew better than my dad. And I went to the movies and fell asleep behind the wheel coming back. And they said that I probably fell asleep about 1.5 miles up the road, but I was awake enough to steer. So I hit a tree, I don't know, at least 100 miles an hour on the driver's side.
Oh my gosh, wow.
My right arm was back by my elbow. I had lost my nose, teeth. Every rib was crushed and broken in multiple places. My breastbone was split in half by a few inches. My left leg was crushed. My left foot was crushed. My left foot had a hole through it as well on top of that.
Were you by yourself in the car, or were you with your friend? Okay.
In fact, that was the only question I had when they saved me, and my father finally got there. I needed to know if anybody else was hurt. When they said nobody else was hurt, then I told my dad, I said, now I know I can get through this. Yeah. And there's a lot of holes in my story with that because, I don't know what's true and what's not true as far as my memory goes. I know my injuries are true because it took it took years to rehab from that. And the way I did rehab is on my dresser next to my I guess night table next to my bed, I had a training journal that I used as an athlete. So I ripped the cover off because it said training journal on it, and I ripped all the training pages out. I just wrote at the top of the first page, one crack at a time. So what I did is after many months of recovery, and my parents were back to work at this point, I had my brothers tie some ties together that my dad wouldn't miss. Tucked them under my bed, and the first day that both my parents were back to work, that I was cognizant enough to do something, I took the ties out, attached it to my walker, and with my one good hand, lowered the walker down the stairs, slid down the stairs, got into my walker, opened the front door, and did the first crack on the sidewalk. And that took me from the time my parents went to work, and I was just getting back into my bed when they got home, 9-10 hours later.
Wow.
And every day was one more crack, one more crack, one more
So you would
crack.
just kind of push yourself from one crack to the other in the sidewalk.
Yeah, and I've had to do that several times in my life, one crack at a time, because sometimes you're not taking the whole laugh, you know? So yeah,
Yeah.
that's how it was. And then after a while, I went to work as a janitor. And when I was in my late 20s, I decided I wanted to conquer New York real estate with no college education, no connections. You know, I was a janitor. So I went in and interviewed probably at about 300 companies, found one company stupid enough to hire me. And within a pretty short period of time, I was the youngest senior vice president of any major company in New York City. I ran one of, I didn't run, but I was senior VP for one of the largest companies in Manhattan. And
And
I
how old were
eventually,
you?
probably 29 or 30 at that point,
Okay.
by the time I was, probably 30 by the time I was a VP. Um, and then, and then, I'm sorry, I had open heart surgery. I have some short-term memory issues. Um, and then,
Now,
okay, thank you. You saved me from it.
I'm curious. I'm just kind of it's my mind is a little bit blown about your journey. Kind of backtracking a little bit with, you know, back to when you were using the walker and rehabilitating yourself. I feel like so many people would just feel like hopeless.
You know what?
You know,
Yeah,
and what
yeah.
kept you going? Like, what did you have a specific goal in mind?
You know, I don't know. I'm kind of a driven person. I never feel sorry for myself. You know,
Hmm.
I never had that pity party.
Hmm.
I may have a few years later, maybe 8 or 9 years later, but I didn't for the first many years. I never let it get me down. I was in so much pain. It was really hard to focus on anything else. So I just kept pushing and pushing and pushing and going after different things. And, you know, I know a lot of people in my situation gone through a depression because, you know, they were shooting for a certain goal, you know, as an athlete,
Right.
and all of a sudden it's taken away from you. But yeah, I never really went through that. It was my fault. Um, I never really felt sorry for myself. I just looked at it as a change of direction. I knew something good would come out of it. I didn't know what, and it did take many years,
Hmm.
but I knew something good would come out of it. So I just kept pushing. And then in my early 20s, I got married and had, you know, I got 4 beautiful kids and 5 great grandchildren. Well, 5 grandchildren that are great,
Right.
and another one on the way. But I didn't really have time to feel sorry for myself. I got married at 22 years old and I had a family to
Yeah.
raise and we had children right away. So you know, I had to work and I was working as a janitor and I was typically working 2 or 3 jobs. You know, I'd work in Queens and then I mean, Brooklyn across from my house. And then I'd go to Queens and work as a janitor in my dad's building at night. And then I'd work 12 hours Saturday, 12 hours Sunday. I'd do anything that anybody would let me do. So I was typically putting in, you know, 80 to 100 hours a week minimum.
Wow.
And so I didn't really have time to feel sorry for myself or ponder what I had
Hmm.
lost or anything else.
So it seems like you were just really focused on, you know, what what you had going on in your life and making that all work.
Yeah, and you know, at first the goal was to walk because they told me I'd never walk.
Hmm.
So you know, I didn't want to think about what the doctors were telling me. That I'd never walk. I'd never use my right arm properly. And I'm 59 years old. I do better with my broken body than most people do with their healthy bodies. But that was because I didn't listen to what the experts were telling me.
Yeah.
And that's also been a theme through my life. You know, I've had, you know, dean of a business school happened to be irrelevant at the time. You know, tell me that I was nothing, I was dumb. You know, I was never smart enough to achieve anything. So like a lot of my early life was, you know, basically a f you. You know, I used, you know, kind of, you know, f you. I'm gonna do it as
Hmm.
motivation to basically show people I could do what I wanted to do. And the thing is, ignorance is bliss as well, Sarah. I didn't know I couldn't do certain things.
Right.
So I went after them and I did them. You know, whereas a lot of people wouldn't have tried because maybe they had an education. They said, "Oh, this is impossible. You can't do this." Well, I didn't know what was possible, and I didn't know what was impossible. You know, I was the worst athlete in my area, but I worked very hard and became a very, very good athlete. So I was able to overcome things where people said I couldn't do things. So I basically don't listen to people at all. And
That's awesome.
when I'm going after something, like I interviewed, you know, probably 300 companies to get into Manhattan real estate. I always looked at it like they didn't have enough information to make an intelligent decision. So I, I
Hmm.
just kept trying again.
Yeah. So you never went to that place of like, why me? What's wrong with me? Stuff like that that can just like bring you down into the hopelessness
Yeah,
that
not that I
sometimes
can
happens.
remember. I'm sure I have
Yeah.
my moments. Believe
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
I'm sure I have my moments, but not that I can remember. And if I did, it wasn't for any length of time. But I also, I was also very blessed. I come from an incredible family. My parents and my brothers were very supportive of me. Um, my best friend Brian came and saw me all the time. He's still my best friend. We talk every day. I'm almost 60 years old, and I was surrounded by a lot of positive people that didn't feel sorry for me.
Right.
Now, behind closed doors, I found that many years later, yes, they did.
They just
But
didn't show it.
to my face, they never pitied me. Now, I did have people who came in and pitied me.
Mm-hmm.
People come in, they start crying. I would tell my mother, never let them come back.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want them around me. I surrounded myself with what I needed. And at that time, I needed to move forward. And in order to move forward, I needed to have somewhat of a positive mindset.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The environment is so crucial. What I have found, and it sounds like you had that yourself too. So
Oh, it's critical.
yeah, yeah. And I'm really curious, this experience you had so early on in life with the walker and retraining your body and recovering that way. Do you feel like how do you feel like that experience has influenced what you're doing even today, and going back to that experience and seeing and taking some of the principles that you used back then? Like, have you found yourself reusing that?
It's changed the whole direction of my life. So
Yeah.
yes, I use those principles every day, but also it did change the direction of my life. I wasn't going to be an athlete again. It was
Right.
doubtful if I would even walk. I knew I would walk, but they were saying I wouldn't. And so I needed to move forward, and I needed to work on certain aspects. And I asked the question. I have to apologize. I have some short-term memory issues from this open heart surgery. So
It's
what was the
totally
question
okay.
again? What was the question again? So I could.
Oh, how you have used the experience with the walker to help you to like move forward and overcome things, today
Okay,
in the
got it.
rest of your life.
Okay. For those of you listening, you can see that I'm not the smartest guy in the world. So if I could be successful, you've got the opportunity if you just achieve it. Yeah, it changed the direction of my life. I wanted to be an athlete, and I was in whatever I was going to do in that arena, and kind of see where life took me. And I had certain goals. And those goals were all taken away from me. So,
Hmm.
like I said earlier, I became a janitor. I went into real estate. I've had various businesses. I owned the gym. The gym with Pumping Iron was a pretty famous gym at the time. But what I do today is I teach people how to live healthy lifestyles, and I use all the lessons I've learned over the last 40 years on how to do that. Because overcoming obesity, or overcoming negative thoughts, or overcoming, just bad eating habits, for most people, it's as insurmountable as me starting to walk again.
Right.
And just a quick story. When I was laying in bed, one of my friends walked in, and he was wearing flip-flops. My
Hmm.
arm is here, my leg is up in the air, my nose was all, my whole face was a mess. And this guy comes in, and I could see the pain in his face. He felt so bad for me
Mm.
until he stubbed his toe. Once he stubbed his toe, he could care less about me. His painful toe was way worse and way more important to him than me being crushed in a car accident. So
Oh
my
my
point
gosh.
is, if somebody's struggling, maybe with depression, or struggling with overeating, or not exercising, whatever it is, an unhealthy lifestyle in any shape or form, it can be just as insurmountable as a car accident was to a lot of people who saw me.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that makes sense, but I talk to people all the time, and there's a desperation out there. And what I do, my job, I think, is I'm a minister of hope. I
Hmm.
bring hope to people's lives because they see me, that dummy can do it. Maybe I can, you know?
Yeah, when when I'm talking with people about challenges and traumas even, a lot of people feel like, oh, my trauma wasn't big enough to really care about. That wasn't a big deal. That just, it wasn't as bad as that person's problem. But what I have seen in just working with so many different people is that it doesn't matter how big or small somebody's problem is to anybody else. If that's what you know and that's what you have experienced, it's just as, one challenge is just as big as anybody else's challenge, in relation to your experience.
No question. Like I'm writing a book right now, so it's fresh in my brain. And there'll be a slight section, and it's a weight loss book,
Yeah.
but there'll be a slight section there on how to eat. Let's face it, I'm bored. How many ways can you tell people to eat protein and vegetables, drink clean
Yeah.
water, and eat healthy fats? You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And then how many ways are there to tell people to move?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a little bored. So, through the process of everything I've gone through in the last year or so, I'm writing a book, and it's really, if you're happy, if you're joyful, if you're completed, basically, if you read the Bible, the fruits of the Spirit, if you're feeling healthy about yourself, and if you're feeling good about yourself, and you are right, the weight will come off.
Right. Exactly.
It's most people eat because they're unhappy, or they're traumatized, or they have a childhood trauma.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of weight loss people were abused as children.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to it, but yet our society focuses on nutrition, and because it's very profitable to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But the bottom line is that people don't need another diet. They need to learn how to get themselves right.
John, what you just said, as like kind of being bored with saying the same things over and over again, what you just said, I think, is the most important thing that anybody listening could possibly hear about getting healthy.
Yeah,
That it's more than just the nutrition and the exercise, which those are huge components, obviously. But that's the thing. What you just said is what I think most people are probably missing, who aren't seeing the results.
it is. In every book I've written, I started off as a personal development writer. I have my first two books.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, but my first two books were hard books, and they both hit number one on the bestsellers list. But they were personal development books, along the lines of, like, say, a Zig Ziglar or Tony Robbins.
Mm-hmm.
And funny thing is, I do digital books now. We make a lot of money doing it, and we're very blessed with it. We help millions of people around the world with it. My books haven't changed.
Yeah.
They're personal development books that do teach some nutritional habits. They do teach. So typically, my books are typically written mind and body, or mind, body, spirit. Sometimes I leave the spirit out to leave the spiritual aspect out, but it's usually mind and body. So the first 3/4 of my books typically are motivational books.
Yeah.
How to make themselves right, and showing them what's possible that may seem impossible to them. And then I teach them how to eat and exercise.
Mm-hmm.
But so basically, I think somebody told me early on when I first got into internet marketing, I was telling them I want to teach people this because they don't need another diet. And the guy tells me, I think it was Joel Marion, he tells me, sell them what they want, but give them what they need.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
So
that.
I sell them what they want, which is to lose weight.
Right.
But I give them what they need, which is to get this right. Because if this is not in control, this controls what goes in here.
Right. Exactly.
So if your head isn't right, bad things are going to go in your mouth.
Yeah.
And come out of your mouth too.
I had an experience kind of like that a few years ago. I was never like terribly overweight, but I always had, you could say, what's the word I'm trying to say? Like disordered eating because of just some things, the way I was raised and stuff like that. And I had a lot of fear around food. And because of that, that led to overeating and almost like an addiction with food. And I did some inner work that I had no idea would lead to any correlation with my eating. And I found myself one day saying, I don't get hungry at night anymore. Like I don't crave sugar the way I used to crave sugar. And I used to just like pound like cookies and ice cream and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, I just suddenly something switched inside of me, and I didn't intentionally, set out to do that. But I just noticed the behaviors changing, which is amazing.
Well, most people would, I'm not saying everybody, obviously,
Yeah.
but most people wouldn't consider doing cocaine or, drinking a fifth of vodka or, doing these different things to enhance themselves, to enhance their mood. But most people also have no problem dealing with the most dangerous drug out there, which is food, because it changes our state. And that state change, like, we talked about snacking at night.
Right.
Well, a lot of people snack at night to change their state. If you eat a heavy laden food with sugar and heavy carbs, it settles you down, at least temporarily. It settles you down. So that's why a lot of people overeat, is because they're just trying to settle their nerves a little bit, trying to settle themselves down. They're trying to find some peace in the storm through eating. And that doesn't get covered in the media too much.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm excited to share some of your books in the show notes for this, because I think a lot of people will benefit from that.
Thank you.
Now, so you had mentioned, and I haven't heard the story yet from you, so I'm excited to hear, the whole thing. But you had mentioned something really profound that happened in 2008.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that and your journey with that?
Yeah. Back then, I was a motivational speaker. I had two hard books out that had done very well.
Mm-hmm.
But in that
and
world,
what are they called? What are the titles?
the one is called Climb Your Ladder of Success Without Running Out of Gas, and the other one is called The Power of Positive Fitness.
Okay,
And,
awesome.
and so we had those two books out. But in that world, basically, your hardcover books are a business card to motivational speaking. So I was making my money as a motivational speaker. At the same time, we owned a relatively large painting company here in North Carolina. And my ex-wife and my two sons were running that at the time. And I one of the subdivisions that we were in went bankrupt.
Wow.
So and it was a very large subdivision, and it was multi-million-dollar homes, and there was a lot of money out there. And I would say probably our cheapest paint job in that subdivision was probably $90,000.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't want to get into a lot of numbers and how much I lost, but it was a lot. It was
Mm-hmm.
substantial. And so what happened is all my builders went bankrupt, owing me a lot of money.
Yeah.
And yeah, I did pay my bills. We paid our employees and our vendors and all, but we had nothing left. But we were stealing from Peter to pay Paul. I was doing pretty good as a motivational speaker, so we're kind of using that to fund. But shortly after that, the speaking industry died in 2008. Corporations, like I was supposed to speak for IBM, and the head of IBM called me up because we're canceling this event. I said, I thought you guys were doing good. He goes, we are doing good. He goes, but it's hard to justify having an event when the economy is so bad.
Which is funny because that's probably the most important time to do the event.
Right. That was my thought too. Exactly right. So, so what happened was all my speaking gigs failed.
Yeah.
My painting company was gone. Okay, it was a slow death, but it was a death, and we lost it. My house was under foreclosure for a couple of years. I didn't have a car for a few years. It was rough. I couldn't get a job anywhere. I'd go to Starbucks. Oh, I know your books. I've seen you on TV. I couldn't get a job anywhere. Nobody would give me a shot, even though I would tell them I would give them a 2-year contract. I need to work. It wasn't like I was being lazy. I wanted to work. I couldn't get a job anywhere. My ex-wife got a job for about 2 years as an office manager. So that allowed us to eat.
Mm-hmm.
But we still weren't paying our mortgage. We may have started to get caught up on it a little bit. And then in 2000, so that was 2008. So it was from 2008 to 2012. And it was a long,
that's a long 4 years.
Oh my God. And I remember going to my pastor, we'd meet with him every week. He goes, John, you're on the 99 yom. I've been on the 99 yom for 3 years, and, everybody saw me being successful again. And I did too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll tell you, it was a rough ride. And then I remember in 2012, I wrote Old School New Body. And John Benson is my partner on that, and Steve Holman. And there's a story behind that, but we don't need to get into that today. But I remember going out on my back deck and just praying, Lord, if we could just get $500 a week so we could eat. If we lose the house, we lose the house, but we need to eat. We need to have some money to eat. And so I remember talking to John Benson. I said, when we launch Old School New Body, how long will it take before we start making money? He goes, right away. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, sure, right away. We did $5 million in the first 90 days.
Oh my gosh.
So I never went bankrupt. Everybody else who was involved with that.
So 500 turned to 5 million.
Yeah. 500 turned to 5 million.
Yeah.
In all fairness, it didn't all come to me. And we paid out, we paid out, marketers and everything else.
Right.
But it was a hell of a start, and Old School New Body is still a bestseller, still doing fabulous. It's probably in the top 5 or 8 of ClickBank still, which is unheard of.
Now, can you tell us what kind of, over those 4 years, like, we have been through some challenging times with our family, but it was never sustained that long. And so I can just imagine, the mental journey that you must have gone through during that time. What are some of the mental shifts that you've made and some of the changes that you made over that time period?
It was horrific. It was one of the most devastating points of my life because I wasn't a kid anymore.
Right.
you know.
And you
So
had a family, right?
yeah, in 2008, I was 48 years old. I had 4 kids. I
Wow.
think
Yeah.
my 2008. Um, Most of them were out of the house at that point. I think Jacqueline, I think my youngest was still in the home at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Then on top of it, we had some personal tragedies. My ex-wife's mother, who was a wonderful lady, ended up getting cancer and
Yeah.
suffered for a few years, really suffered, and then passed away. So that was tragic for my wife and for me too, but really, really very tragic for my wife. So she's going through all this while I'm
Mm-hmm.
going, while we're losing everything. And I can't work. Um, I just focused on the goal.
Right.
And I was very fortunate in my life where I had a lot of people I could reach out to. So I was reaching out, well, they were reaching out to me, I should say, even like, Sean Phillips. And he was reaching out to me probably daily at that point. And I had Zig Ziglar, Mr. Ziglar reaching out to me. And his secretary was always, probably every week, reached out to me. I called her my angel on my shoulder because she always encouraged me.
Yeah.
And then I had, at the time, I had, not the time, I still do, some very good friends, the Yeagers. They're the #1 family in Amway. And I was speaking for them at the time, and even they had to stop me from speaking. I did take one gig with them. I said, listen, I'll take anything. I went to South Africa and spoke, I don't know how many times in 10 days, 15, 20 times in 10 days,
Wow.
and for $1,000. I flew all the way to South Africa for $1,000. And my speaking fee was, much, 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 much more than that for 1 hour.
Mm-hmm.
I did it for 10 days. I took anything that was out there. So a few things happened. Not that I was cocky before that. It really humbled me.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew if I was going to be successful again, the only reason I was going to be successful is because I didn't quit and God chose to bless me. And that was the only way I could look at it. And my faith got me through a lot of it. But I was, I struggle. I don't want to come off like I'm some superhero. That was a very hard 4 years. I wasn't sleeping good. Also, at the same time, I had heart disease. Looking back, it was starting at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting winded very easily. I could never figure it out. I don't need to get into all the health issues. But there was a lot going on at that time. And that period of time also led to my divorce, which is unfortunate. And it was just a tragic time for me and my family, just the whole 9 yards. But I never gave up. I kept working. If something didn't work, I tried something else. I took over the marketing for Ironman magazine, the bodybuilding magazine. Did the same thing for Powerhouse Gym magazine. Neither one of those worked out, but I knew if I wasn't walking, God couldn't bless my steps. And it did work out, because what happened was I was looking for new writers for Powerhouse Gym magazine and an Ironman magazine. And somebody told me about Mike Geary. Now, Mike Geary is one of the top internet marketers in the world by far. He's one of the best out there. And one of the nicest, by the way. And I interviewed him for the magazine. And then I think I might have put him on a podcast, on the Ironman podcast or whatever. And but through that, we were talking. He goes, well, what are you up to? I said, Mike, you don't want to hear my story. He goes, I do. So I told him I just lost everything. And, it's been 3.5 years. Blah, 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 blah. I can't make any money. And he goes, you need to do a ClickBank product. He goes, you've got books out there. You're well known. And I didn't even know what ClickBank was. So he encouraged me to do it. And I did it. And 18 months from that day, ClickBank closed their offices down and had John Rowley Day, and had me speak through closed circuit TV to their company all around the world. So things changed quickly once they changed.
Right.
There was a long ways coming.
Now, when you said God chose to bless me, some people listening to that might feel like, well, God's not choosing to bless me, or they may have moments of that. So what do you feel like kind of put you in that position where you just received so many blessings and you got so much spiritual assistance throughout this process? Because from what I've seen and experienced, there's a two-way relationship.
There is. And I want to say this before I even answer that question. Number one, I'm not a theologian by any stretch of the imagination. And, I do get questions, just like anybody who has some kind of faith would get a question. Well, why is it? Why are the hurricanes? You know what I mean? So right. I don't know the answers to that. And I don't think any of us will truly know the answer until we cross over to the other side. But for me, my faith allowed me to not give up. So I didn't give up because I had my faith. Now, did God bless it? Yeah, I think God blesses everything. But if I wasn't walking, if I wasn't pushing, if I wasn't, there would have been nothing to bless, if that makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of what I was getting is, getting from what you've been sharing with us is that you just kept moving. You know, there's nothing to bless if you're not doing anything. I think the connection may be. Are you still there? All right, so the recording just cut out for a second, but just to bring it back together. So John, we were talking about the co-creative process and how you just kept on moving and kept on taking steps and just never giving up, and how, you know, the result of that was God just kept blessing you. And you were saying, you know, you're not like a theologian, but you had some really cool stuff to say. So
yeah, I'm not a theologian by any stretch, and you know, a lot of people will question, you know, cancer, monsoons, you know, devastation in this world, and how can a loving God do that? I don't know. So let's get that out of the way. But what I do know in my life is my faith allowed me to keep moving. Now, when I was 19 years old, I did have faith, but I only have faith in myself. So faith is powerful. But I had faith in myself that I could get through that car accident. And I had faith that I could get into Manhattan real estate and things like that. When I became 35, I became a Christian. So my definition of faith has changed. So through this whole thing is I just know one thing for sure. And this I can say for certain. God could not have blessed me if I wasn't walking. So I was doing things for him to bless. You know, so a lot of people say, well, how come God's not blessing me? Well, what are you doing? I'm staying home praying 24 hours. Well, he's not, what's he going to bless? You're not doing anything, you know? And, you know, or I'm doing this. Well, okay, you're working over here at the hardware store, but you want to own a business. What are you doing to get to that business? Well, nothing. I'm waiting for God to bless me. It doesn't work that way. Faith is an action. And you have to have actions with your faith. So yes, that action, you know, I've heard people say, you know, you take one step towards God, he'll take 10 steps towards you. Well, you know, at times in my life, I feel like I've walked across the country and he didn't come near me. You know, like during those 4 years, I felt like I was walking and he wasn't anywhere in sight. But I didn't lose my house. We had our health. My family didn't fall apart. We didn't lose everything. You know, we lost mostly everything, but we didn't lose everything. And we didn't lose ourselves. So the faith for me, it kept me going. Now, as far as God blessing things, I think God, you know, God is a good God and he does bless us. And, but he also blesses us with the skills. You know, so it's like, you know, I look at myself like as a well-worn tool in the hand of the master. How can I brag about my success? I shouldn't brag I drive a Maserati. My Maserati is very fast. But the Maserati can't brag because, number one, the Maserati isn't driving itself, so I'm the driver. Secondly, the Maserati didn't create itself. It was created by the Maserati builders. So I can't brag about my success because I didn't give myself these skills. They were given to me. Now, have I honed them? Have I worked hard? Have I put in 18 and 20-hour days or 48-hour days? Yes, I have. I've worked very, very, very hard. I know a lot of people. As an athlete, I was probably the least talented guy on the team, but I was one of the better ones because I worked hard. In business, I'm by far one of the least talented guys I know. I'm surrounded by, you know, some of my friends. I'm surrounded by the best of the best in the world, not just locally here where I live, but in the world. I'm best friends with some of the most successful business people in the world. And I'm nowhere near as talented as them, but I have been successful because I work very hard. I utilize the skills God has given me. But that's also another thing. I work with Dan Sullivan. He's my business coach up in Canada. And Dan teaches you to focus on your unique ability. Now, he doesn't cover it from a religious aspect. I'm not even sure if Dan is religious or not. But your unique ability is something unique to you. Now, for me, my unique skills is seeing a market, and I can pretty much look at a market and judge whether or not I want to get into it and I can be successful in it and what direction it's going. And secondly, I communicate. So whether it be on a podcast like this, TV, radio, in writing with my books, whatever it is, my job is to communicate. My staff does everything else. I communicate. I do this. I don't have to worry about what's going on with my email list or split testing on different pages or the servers going. I don't deal with any of that. My staff does, and I'm very blessed that my oldest son is the president of that company. And so it's a family affair, but we have other people that work with us. But I focus on what I'm good at. And I know it's a roundabout way of getting back to your answer, but God isn't going to, if God has nothing to bless, he's not going to bless you.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And one of my favorite messages that I've heard about all of that is like, we are the hands and the feet.
Yeah.
And it's like what you've done is you've like figured out what the role of those hands and feet are and just keep like moving them.
Well, I don't know if I figured anything out. I'm ADD. I just keep pushing. It's my nature.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't give up very easily. And really, the only time I gave up, and we could talk about this if you want to, is I had surgery and had a bunch of complications.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably the only time in my life I ever gave up. Other than that, I've had setbacks. I get depressed. I've been sad. Well, not really depressed, but sad and lack of hope.
Mm-hmm.
But then you got to reel that in, and you got to pull your pants up and put your big boy pants on and get to it and do something.
And that's the human experience, right? Nobody's going to have this perfect life.
No.
And if you expect to have a perfect life, you're in for a disappointment.
Well, exactly. And even when I was losing everything, I had another benefit that a lot of people don't have. I really love my kids, my family.
Yeah.
And every day I reminded myself the kids are watching. Every day. So I couldn't give up. Now, did they see me give up? Did they see me down? I'm sure they did. I don't want to make it like I'm just, some superhero. I'm sure they did. I'm sure they see me down. But I tried to stay up and I tried to keep moving forward.
And I think that's great that they've seen the whole spectrum, to only see the wins and successes may give them this false sense of, what the world is like and what life is like. So to see you in those moments and to see you come back out of it, I think is a great gift.
It must have paid off. Every one of my kids are highly successful. They're very, very successful. And they're not going through the bumps and bruises that I went through, which is, I'm so fortunate to watch that because you don't want to watch your kids go through that,
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, so you said you had, one more story to share with something that happened more recently with some health challenges and how, this, I know it's been a super rocky road and you really have, you look amazing right now.
Well, thank you.
And you sound great. So, tell me what's been going on and what kinds of stuff you've been tapping into to overcome this current situation.
Well, I'll start off with a public service announcement. If you haven't been tested for heart disease, get tested.
Yeah.
Now, you've seen me before surgery, so I was healthy. I look good. What I had was called the Widowmaker. No symptoms. I started experiencing symptoms probably 15 years ago where I was having some problems breathing and, I get winded easy. But I did a few stress tests, I think 4 or 5 stress tests. And my cardiologist is a very close friend of mine. And every stress test came back as negative. It was like I had a heart of an Olympic athlete. And thank God I had no heart damage, but the arteries leading to my heart were closed. I had 2 arteries 100% closed, and I had another artery 99% closed. When the surgeon came in and saw me the next day, he said my heart was gray and beating at about 10% capacity. But because I stayed in shape, my heart grew another artery.
Are you serious? Your heart grew another artery?
Grew another artery. And I think that's
common.
Have they
ever heard
with
of
younger
that?
guys.
Okay.
Yeah, I think mainly with younger people, people in their 20s and 30s that were very active or, high level athletes. So me staying in shape over the years had paid a dividend, it paid a benefit. So, my son, Jimmy, was my caregiver and all my kids were great and supportive. But the cardiologist goes in, he goes, okay, we'll do the catheter now. So we go in, and there was a process before that. So we do the catheter, and he goes, worst case scenario, but 1 or 2 stents. He comes back out, he goes, we need to get you in for open heart surgery right away.
Oh my gosh.
He goes, you got the worst case of heart disease I've ever seen. So the surgery itself wasn't that bad. Yes, it was painful. You get cut open,
Mhm.
they rip your ribs open, they push your lungs aside, they turn your brain off, which is why I have some short-term memory issues that are much better now than they were. I had some breathing issues, but post-surgery wasn't too bad. It was painful. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to belittle that. But I was able to deal with the pain. I was able to walk, and I was walking more than anybody up there. In
Mhm.
fact, my first day of walking, my daughter Jessica, I think it was Jessica, was with me. Yeah, it was Jessica. And I looked at the nurse, and I said, "How far is the furthest person ever walked on their first day?" And she goes, "What?" And my daughter goes, "He's very competitive. He will beat it." And she goes to the door, which was the next door.
Mhm.
Okay, so we get to the door. I said, "I can keep walking. Let's keep going." And I said, "I want to do a whole lap." She goes, "You can't do a whole lap. It's only been hours since your surgery." I said, "Let's go halfway around."
Mhm.
She goes, "Okay, we'll do halfway." Well, if we went halfway, we had to come halfway back. We went the full lap, which is what we did. So I was doing really good for about a week. And then I got very sick. I started spiking 104 plus fever, and they couldn't figure out what it was.
Wow.
I was in the emergency room every day, my cardiologist every day, my family physician every day. They could not figure it out. What happened was after about a week or so, or 10 days of that, um, they, they, they found out the PICC line that they put in my arm was with bandaged. So my
Mhm.
family physician doc, she goes, she goes, "You have pain anywhere?" I said, "Kara, I was cut in half. Of course I have pain." But then I thought about it. I said, "Well, my arm hurts. Not as bad as my chest, but my arm hurts." She goes, "Why didn't they take the bandage off?" She takes the bandage off, and my artery going to my heart was about 2 fingers out,
Mhm.
completely beat red and burning hot to the touch. I had sepsis.
Wow. Wow.
So she gave me a shot of an antibiotic um, and some antibiotics to take home, which should have knocked it out of me. Well, I went home that night, and about 9 or 10 o'clock at night, I was laying in bed, and I get out of bed, walk to the bathroom, which was a chore because I had just opened heart surgery, so I was moving
Mhm.
very slow, and started losing my hearing, started losing my sight, and I lost control of every bodily function.
Wow. What went through
So
your mind at that point when you started losing those senses?
I was dying.
Mhm.
And honestly, I was told you earlier in this interview, I had never given up on anything except for once.
Yeah.
That night, I gave up.
Mm.
So I went in and took a shower because they take the arteries out of your leg, and I had open wounds, and I wanted to shower myself off because went all over myself. I'm not
Mhm.
proud to say that, but in case I lived, I didn't want to get more of an infection in my leg.
Mhm.
So I laid down that night and I did a video to my parents and my kids and my grandkids and my two best friends to say goodbye. And then I must have fallen asleep during that process. And then I woke up at about 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning and texted my son Jimmy. I said, "You need to come and get me, buddy." And he came and got me, and they were ready for me at the hospital. They were running me down the hallway. Did they do this? Did they do this? And finally, somebody said, "Well, we never did a CAT scan on him." And the
Mhm.
cardiologist is like, "He's got a pulmonary embolism. Start getting Coumadin in him," which is a blood thinner. So they're putting Coumadin in me as they're doing the CAT scan, and that's what it was. I had sepsis, very bad sepsis,
Mhm.
and then which led to my lungs being riddled with blood clots, which was killing me. I was suffocating to death.
Wow.
So I'm still on blood thinners. So they gave me the blood thinners. I went from 215, 220 pounds, pretty, solid muscle, pretty lean, and down to 165 pounds. I looked like I was dying. In fact,
Mhm.
after surgery, my friend Brian came down from New York to spend the week with me. And I'm coming down the stairs, and he looks up at me. He goes, "Gee, Mr. Rowley, I didn't know you came to visit John too," meaning it was my dad.
Yeah.
And then he goes, "Wait," he goes, "I don't want to insult your father. Your father looks better than you do." I looked awful.
Oh my gosh.
I hated being around people because I looked like I was 120 years old.
Mm.
And I remember I think it was my son John. I went to his house for something at one point, and I said, "I feel like I'm 80 years old." He goes, "Don't compliment yourself, Dad. You look at least 100." But once they figured that out, I still got sick after that. I had probably another 2 months of being sick, being in and out of
Mm.
the hospital, pneumonia, and just other things from my body shutting down. So yeah, I did give up at that point that night. But once I got back, I didn't give up. Once I figured out what it was, and once my body started to heal a little bit, I was out walking in the snow and the rain. Everybody's like, "We're just walking home." I'm not going to walk at home. I need to walk far. So I would have a bathrobe on, a sweatsuit under the bathrobe, a winter coat, sweaters, a hat, and
Mhm.
I'd be walking down this main road like this, my arms crossed. I could barely move,
Mhm.
inch like a turtle, inching. And my first goal, and this gets back to me talking about learning to walk after my car accident,
Yeah.
I kept a journal. And my first goal was to get to the corner. My second goal was to get to the first telephone pole. My next day, second telephone pole. Next day, the third telephone pole after the birdhouse. You know, it was just like that. And so I just progressively and incrementally worked on me. And that's kind of how I do business. You know, even though I kind of rush things sometimes, I take incremental steps, set up businesses properly so they run functionally without me, and then put people in place one at a time.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I gave up.
But it sounds like life
But I'm
didn't give up
back.
on you. Yeah.
No, they didn't. And my kids were amazing. They helped me get through it. My son Jim, like I said, was my caregiver. I can't say it. I
Yeah.
can't give him enough accolades. And even to this day, I thank him. And he just tells me, "Daddy, I'm just glad I could do it." You know,
Absolutely.
nobody makes me feel bad about the support that they gave me. And you know, as you get older, you don't want to be a burden on your kids.
Yeah.
You know, and I felt like I was a burden on my kids, but they never made me feel that way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's wonderful that you have that kind of relationship with them. And I know that takes years to cultivate and maintain that kind of a connection. Um,
Oh yeah.
I'm curious, what's like the biggest takeaway or one takeaway you have from this most recent experience?
Your health is fragile.
Yeah. Yeah.
Enjoy every day, live every day like it's your last, because it might be your last. You
Yeah.
know, this last experience, unlike the car accident, really did show me my mortality.
Mm-hmm.
And while I'm here, I want to do what I'm here to do.
Right.
Whether I'm comfortable, uncomfortable, whether I'm rich or poor, whether I'm successful or not successful, I want to fulfill my purpose here on earth. I want to stand before God on my day of judgment and hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant." That's what I want to hear.
And
And
what are you here to do?
I feel like I'm here to bring hope to the world.
Mm.
You know, I do it through my books. I do it through nutrition and exercise, because right now, you know, let's face it, health is a huge issue in our world. But it's not just physical health, it's mental health as well. So I'm trying to get involved with that world. You know, I'm very good friends with Keith Abloh, the psychiatrist on Fox News. I talk to him all the time. We're going to do a book together at one point. So I want to be a proponent for physical health, and particularly maybe even a spokesperson at some level for heart disease,
Yeah.
because it's critical. You know, heart disease, men and women, it's the largest killer in the world right now. And it's really not
Yeah.
talked about. It's not as sexy as cancer. It's probably not as profitable as cancer, which is why. And that's another thing. You know, the government and special interest groups and all spend billions of dollars trying to teach us what to eat and how to act, and it's not in our best interest, though. It might be in their best interest,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not in our best interest. So I want to bring hope where people can overcome challenges. People can overcome physical challenges and get in shape and be healthy. Or overcome illnesses, or overcome a mental illness, or maybe overcome challenges in business or whatever else it is. I really feel, and it's taken me years to realize this, I really think that my job is to bring hope to the world in the way I'm designed to do it.
I love that.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think this interview right here is doing just that. And I would encourage everybody who's watching and listening, you know, if this speaks to you, watch it or listen again, and then again and again, because John has just given so much insight and wisdom that applies to every aspect of life. You know, like you said, business and health and fitness and mindset and everything. I mean, you can apply all of this, what you've learned through your experiences, to anything.
And it's all tied together. Can I just tell a
Right.
really brief story?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'll make it real quick. I've been to Kazakhstan and China on missions trips with my church.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I spent 3 weeks in Kazakhstan, probably about a month in China or close to it. But the same experience happened in both areas.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at people that I'm looking at spiritual mentors of mine. They've been Christians much longer than me. They read the Bible better than I do. You kind of look at everybody else instead of yourself. And without fail, within 3 days of both of those trips, the people started turning on each other, backbiting, gossiping about each other, getting angry with each other because they were physically weak.
Wow.
So when I write my books, it's always body, mind, spirit. Because if your body is weak, the mind and spirit is going to follow. Now you can have a you can have a strong body and still be incompetent mentally and spiritually. But if you have a strong body, then it enhances your mind. Because if you feel strong personally, if you feel strong physically, then it's easier to feel strong mentally. Now, it's a different skill to feel strong mentally, but if you're not strong physically, the mental will follow.
It's a great start.
And if you're not strong mentally and physically, the spirit will follow.
Mm-hmm.
So we're a combined unit. You need to take care of body, mind, and spirit. And if you don't, you're going to be out of balance, and it will show up in your life. You may make a ton of money, but you'll be in a hospital with a heart attack,
mm-hmm.
where you may be healthy as can be, but broke.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Or spiritually depraved, or deprived,
mm-hmm.
depending on the person. But that's all I wanted to say, is that it all follows each other. And I did happen to learn it overseas, but I see it every day.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you do as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's one of the things
one more thing about you. Through my surgery, Sarah reached out to me constantly, offering to get me on the phone, offering to help me with things, sending me things to help me. You are the most unselfish person I have ever met, Sarah. And I know I didn't thank you for this because I've been sick, but I want to thank you publicly. I love you, and what you brought to me changed me, because you are so generous and so powerful in what you do. So anyway, I just want to thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. It's my pleasure. And I know you, just working with you a little bit and in hearing about talking with you, that has been so encouraging to me too. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Virtual hug time. So thank you, John. This was an amazing experience. We had an amazing journey with this interview. I think we touched on pretty much the most important things that people probably need to hear right now. So
I appreciate that.
Really appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely.
You have me on. I hope we did bring some value to your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if anybody wants to reach out to you, do you have anything that you can offer to somebody or direct them to a particular place?
Well, johnrowley.net is my main website. We really don't use that very much. It's more for the media.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go to there, you can get in touch with me through that, or Facebook.
Awesome.
I got a fan page on Facebook. My personal one is pretty loaded up, but if you go to my fan page, you can get through me there as well.
Okay, cool. Beautiful. All right. So thank you so much for watching and listening, everybody. And comment, please, with one takeaway you got from this conversation. All right. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.